Are we still waiting on a few folks, Ellen?
We do have all of the trustee committee members that we were expecting. Mark Gardner's going to be joining us, but I think he's going to be a little bit late. So we do have a quorum and we can start whenever you're ready, Trustee Bartholomew.
Thank you, Ellen. So I'd like to call the Human Resource and Labor Relations Committee meeting to order. Ellen, can you please take a roll call for the meeting?
Certainly. Trustee Bartholomew.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Present.
Trustee Mishu.
Present.
Trustee Riley.
Present. Oh,
And we're all set to start.
Great. And as a reminder, participants to please leave your mics on mute unless you're when not speaking. Could I have a motion for the Human Resource and Labor Relations Committee of the Board of Trustees to go into executive session under the provision of 1 MRSA Section 4056-A to discuss the evaluation of personnel and the consideration and discussion of appointments, evaluations, employment, and duties, and 1 MRSA Section 4056-D to discuss planning for negotiations and communication with AFM, UMPSA, ACSUM, police, PATFA, and service and maintenance units.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Ellen, can you take roll call, please?
Certainly. Trustee Bartholomew.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee Mishu.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. All right, now we're back in the public meeting. The first topic on our agenda today is the introduction of the new Chief Human Resource Officer, Loretta Shields. And I'll turn it over to Vice Chancellor Thielen for an overview.
Well, I will keep my remarks very brief, other than to tell you that we are absolutely thrilled to have a Chief Human Resource Officer seated after a long search and a much longer period of transition because we had a year with interim internal leadership. We had a year with interim leadership through a registry candidate with whom we contracted, Carol Corcoran, many of you will remember, who gave us a very solid year in the Chief Human Resource Officer chair. But following a search, we had a consensus around offering Loretta Shields the position. She's with us now. She participated in an executive session. We might have had an introduction there, but we felt it was appropriate to publicly introduce and welcome Loretta Shields as the new Chief Human Resource Officer. I do believe that we included her resume so that you have some sense of her background. And without giving her much heads up, I'll invite her to offer any introductory comments she'd like to make to the committee now.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm excited about being a part of the university, and I'm looking forward to working with you all in the future.
That's great, Loretta. Coming from Sarasota, Florida, we'll make sure we take you out for to find your next ski parker for the winter.
Well, I promised I brought some of the sunshine with me, and that was apparent over the weekend. So there's more sunshine to come.
We're looking forward to that.
That's fabulous.
And Loretta will tell you that she's prepared for winters because she lived in the Cleveland area for a long period of time. So she knows the combination of cold weather, rain, and wind.
Yes, I do.
Great. The next item on our agenda we have is our Employee Health Plan Task Force Scorecard, tab 2 in your workbooks. And I'll have the Director of Compensation, Lori Clark, and Denise Stevenson from Willis Towers Watson produce an overview.
Thank you so much, everyone. And again, good afternoon. I believe Lori is out on PTO today, so I'll just jump in. Quick introduction, Denise Stevenson. I'm the benefits consultant to the University of Maine system, have been partnering with the organization since 1996. Just by way of background, the Employee Health Plan Scorecard, we sit on a task force. We call it IFTIF. We've been meeting monthly since 2020. And IFTIF, just so we're, again, by way of some background, it's a multi-stakeholder workforce. And we work together to, I would say, really inform. We want to make sure that there's common understanding, common language of the drivers of health plan cost, and that there's common awareness of the opportunities to try to bend the trend. So I would say that it's a respectful and engaged group of people who come together for 5 hours the third Friday of every month and have been doing so for quite some time. So this group is very much invested in IFTIF. And over the years, we've put together sort of a scorecard to measure out sort of the areas of success. So IFTIF has 4 pillars of work. One is plan design. One is the network, so the provider network that we're utilizing. The third pillar is health improvement or wellness. And the fourth pillar is communications. So on any given month, the agenda, we usually talk about opportunities for improvement, and we usually touch upon those 4 areas. I will share my screen and bring up the scorecard. So this scorecard, this is reporting out on calendar year 2020. And again, just in setting the table here, 2020 is going to look abnormal for many reasons, primarily the pandemic. As the pandemic hit us in 2020, it absolutely disrupted the way healthcare services were, the healthcare delivery system and the way services were rendered. So 2020 is an interesting year, and that comes off of what was a very difficult calendar year, 2019. So sort of what you might see for years, we had a very nice consistent trend line that was comparable to what I would say industry metrics are, but we're seeing a bit of an anomaly as we go through this data. This first slide is just the total enrollment. So this is the number of individuals who are covered on our self-insured medical plans with Cigna. And you can see for years, the enrollment in these plans has been fairly stable. The contract size measures sort of the number of belly buttons, if you will, so the number of dependent spouses or children. And again, this number has been very stable for many years. I can go back 10 years and it's very stable. You can see the medical claims. So this is per member per month. So you're taking the total spend and dividing it by the number of belly buttons on the plan, if you will, to sort of normalize for any changes in enrollment. And you can see that the medical claims did jump up in 2019. It was a very difficult year driven by high cost claimants. And then you can see in 2020, as the healthcare system shut down, people were avoiding going to hospitals. They were delaying their elective surgeries. You can see that the costs were dramatically reduced in 2020. Pharmacy claims, on the other hand, almost saw the reverse, a reversal. And we actually saw an uptick in pharmacy spend in 2020. So although people weren't accessing the healthcare delivery system for routine medical, they were indeed continuing to obtain their prescription drugs. We've also saw an increase in the number of scripts being requested in 2020 as people couldn't get their sort of medical therapies. They were using more prescription drugs. Also, the pipeline is dramatic. And so even without the pandemic, we've seen across our book of business more spend being driven from the medical bucket to the pharmacy bucket. Your annual trend here, you can see it jumped up in 2019, came back down in 2020. If you look at sort of a 5 or a 7 year longitudinal trend, on average, your plan increases about 7% per year. So you can see the dramatic decline. I think the only other point that I want to make is when we talk about high cost claimants, your underlying key metrics are so stable. It's really this increase in sort of high cost claimants, the number, the prevalence of high cost claimants and the magnitude of those high cost claimants is indeed driving most of the cost. And if you look at sort of the difference between the purple line, which is your total spend PM, and the blue line is if I take the high cost claims out, you can see back in 2012, lines are closer than they are today. And so you can see that the high cost claimants are truly having much more of an impact than they did, 6-7 years ago. Any questions on this slide?
Denise, what do we know about the classes of drugs that are driving the RX spend up? Do we have a sense of what the high cost drugs are? Is it cancer? Is it like?
No, it's a good guess. Yes, a lot of it is specialty injectables like Humira and Enbrels. And what's interesting is that there are some programs out there that address specialty pharmacy costs, but we can't take advantage of them due to Maine legislative law. So it's a lot of specialty injectables and a lot of oncology drugs. We've also seen, particularly sort of in the back half of 2020 and in the first half of 2021, an increase in antidepressants.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions on this slide? Okay. Network usage, the numbers on this slide, there's a lot happening here. Again, we want to make sure that we're working with the carrier that adds the broadest network access and the deepest discounts. We also know that alternative contracting that rewards providers for providing quality care is important. So we do track at the highest level in network, are people using Cigna's broad PPO network? And actually last year in 2019, you almost had perfect network utilization, dropped off a little bit in 2020, but you consistently, despite some of the rural natures of some of your campuses, your population definitely understands the value of seeing in-network providers, and you're well above Cigna's norm. We also measure primary versus specialty care. The IFTIF group very much believes in the importance of primary care. And so we make sure and measure that people are seeing primary care providers at a greater rate than specialty care. And this has remained pretty consistent over the periods, and again, is outperforming Cigna's norm. So that's positive. Some of these other designations, Cigna has sort of changed the way that they've looked at their, I want to call it, they have something called the CCD, so Cigna Care Designation. They have taken their specialists and they measure the specialists for quality outcomes and cost over durations of care. Cigna used to measure 18 different types of specialists. They've stepped away from that a little bit, and they're measuring now like 13, I think, if memory serves. So this statistic is being thrown off by a change in the way that Cigna is doing this program, and then also layering in the difficulty and just the anomalies of 2020. So this statistic, I'm going to watch it, but I'm not putting much credibility into that number right there, that dramatic decline. I'd like to see what 2021 looks like. And then similarly, Cigna is stepping away from sort of using the centers of excellence term, and they're more focused on their CAC contracts. A centers of excellence identifies a hospital as providing a specific service particularly well, whereas the CAC contracts are more holistic, and the hospitals in Maine, almost all of them have now signed a Cigna CAC agreement, and it measures their outcomes across a greater variety of metrics. I think that as we move into next year's discussions with IFTIF at the beginning of the year, we always sort of talk about some strategic things we should look at. And I would like to put this back on the table for the group to discuss further. There are some external vendors who are addressing centers of excellence in different ways. And the group has learned about it a little bit over the years, but I think that it's an opportunity that we need to continue to address with the group for consideration. And any questions on this page? Okay. Plan management. So these are just some key metrics. And again, emergency room visits. I remember years ago, you were upwards of 300 visits per 1,000 members. So a lot of work has been done in this space. I would say by the providers, by making sure that there's options to emergency room visits, and by the group. Over the years, they've agreed to increase the emergency room copay as a way to disincent people from using the emergency room. They've also done a lot of work trying to talk about how do we increase awareness of minute clinics or urgent care centers. So we've had some visits by Convenient MD has come in and educated the group about the services that they can provide. So you can see an uptick in urgent care. Telemedicine, this measures the actual visits that are through Cigna's telemedicine service. So we know in 2020, a lot of people's regular brick and mortar providers pivoted pretty quickly, right? Psychiatrists, dermatologists, they wanted to protect their revenue. They started providing telehealth. That number is off the chart in 2020. This number that we're looking at is Cigna offers a separate national telemedicine program that remains pretty underutilized. The group has been watching this statistic over the years, and for 2021 decided that we would waive copays for anyone who wanted to use Cigna's telemedicine vendor. Crompton Burton, through his Healthy in Maine newsletters, has tried to promote telehealth. It's a excellent point of access, and it's at a lower unit cost. We're just struggling to get awareness and adoption of that program. Generic medication.
Could I ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
So that's interesting. So the Cigna how does the Cigna telemedicine assure continuity of care with the primary provider? Because it's obviously different people.
Yeah, so it's not intended to replace primary care, but it is intended to be primarily, there's some urgent care, there's some dermatology, and they also offer emotional well-being services. So if you need to speak to a licensed therapist, you can, I believe, click at the end of your visit to say, please share my results with my primary care physician.
Thanks.
Yep. And I believe that if you're using Well Connection or the telehealth, if you will, service, and you are using it for mental health, that you can book reoccurring appointments with the same provider so that you don't have to start over each and every time. The generic prescribing has always been, this group spends a lot of time talking about generic drugs and the opportunity there, and you consistently outperform the national benchmarks on prescribing patterns. Also, Maine has mail match, which means that if a retail pharmacy is willing to mirror mail order pricing, that people can use their local pharmacy for 90 days and receive the same benefit. And you can see that you have very strong usage of sort of that mail order, mail match program, which is good. It means that people are buying ongoing prescriptions in 90 days. It helps with keeping members compliant with their meds. And also when you buy drugs in 90-day increments, it's cheaper than buying them in a smaller 30-day unit size. And then the EAP, it's interesting in 2020, a time of great change and great struggle. It was a very unusual year. We talked about people's emotional well-being and how important it was that they were aware of the tools and resources. And we're seeing a slight uptick, right, in the usage of the EAP. But again, when we talk at IFTIF, this is a great underutilized opportunity for people to seek help and get care across a variety of situations. And I want to show you this. Where is it? The group actually challenged Cigna to put together slideshow and says, there's so many tools and resources, and people get overwhelmed with all there is. Could we possibly put together something that shares and helps people? And so the group challenged Cigna to put this together, and Cigna did. So this is a very quick slideshow, and it actually comes with a soundtrack. So if you click this little speaker down in the left-hand corner, it will walk you through all these different programs and how they're used and where are the websites and how to go. And so this presentation is an example of, using data at IFTIF and then asking the group, how can we address and how can we increase awareness and hopefully reduce healthcare costs for everyone. Of course, now I'm going to have trouble getting back to where I was. Any questions on this section on plan management? Okay. Section 4, we have a wellness program. So anyone who completes a level 1 task receives a premium incentive for the balance of the year. Level 1 requires people to either A, get a preventive care visit, or B, have a session with a Trestle Tree health coach. And you can see the vast majority of people do indeed earn their level 1 incentive. There was a drop in 2020. There was a lack of engagement across the board for everyone, for everything in 2020. Just they were distracted by the pandemic. So that's not a huge surprise, and it's not a huge drop, but it's notable. Level 2 is a menu of activities. Anyone who completes level 1 can move on to level 2. They complete an activity and they earn $100 that's paid out sort of at the end of the year. And you can see a drop in the number of folks earning level 2 activities. I'm just trying to be respectful of time. I don't have a good feel for cadence here. Tell me if I'm going too fast or too slow. Communications, again, is one of the 4 pillars. So we talk a lot about how to make people aware of their benefits. HUB does what we call Healthy in Maine. So this is an example of the Healthy in Maine newsletter that was just released, and we measure to see if people are clicking on it, are they paying attention, are they reading it? And you can see this measures the number of emails that were sent out, and we measure how many people opened them and then how many are clicking through to the additional content. It was interesting, before the pandemic, we were seeing a pretty steady increase in their rates. And in 2019, we were at about a 2/3 open rate. In 2020, again, it's decreased, but again, very much in line with what we're seeing across our book of business. Just people aren't engaging in programs like they used to. Health improvement. At the end of the day, we always talk about people need to take care of their health and the importance of primary care and preventive care. We spend a lot of time talking about it at these IFTIF meetings. Again, in 2020, you can see the decline. People stopped going for their preventive visit. We're hoping that returns to prior levels, but you're still 10 points better. Well, that's not 10 points. I guess I can't do math in my head. Six points better than Cigna's norm this past year. So although you had some attrition, you're still better off than Cigna's baseline norms. The preventive care, though, the mammograms, the cancer screenings, all held, which says a lot, because this is not what I've seen with many of my other clients, where not only did the annual visits fall off, but all the preventive screenings fell off as well. You actually had good adherence to people continuing to get their screenings. And then the gaps in care measures, what's an example of gaps in care? So there's a predictive model, and we pay attention to, are people being compliant with their therapies? So an example would be, if you were a diabetic, you're supposed to get your eyes checked, your foot checked. You're supposed to make sure you're taking your your strips every month. So if you have gaps in care, this means 76% of the time people are doing everything that they're supposed to. So that also held. So even though you had the stress of the pandemic, people continued to manage their chronic conditions, which I also see as a positive outcome. And then medication adherence, you can see that people are still, again, adherent to their drug therapy is very important. And overall, this is the overall health score. So none of us are getting any younger, unfortunately. Your average age pretty constant, a little bit older, but the average risk score a little bit better. So, so again, not shockingly different. I wouldn't say that this is statistically significant, but it's certainly better than it moving in the other direction. And again, out here, the number of folks who are being triaged as either very high risk or very high risk, these folks have had a significant impact on overall spend. So, trying, our goal in IFTIF, I think, is try to keep the healthy, try to keep the folks that are sort of in this medium bucket. We don't want them to slide further down the healthcare continuum. If we can encourage them to take positive actions to improve their health, that's sort of a goal. And unfortunately, those who have slipped into sort of the higher risk buckets have indeed driven most of the spend. Any questions?
Denise, thank you for the for the data and the trends and the state of our group health, a kind of update. It's great to see kind of where some opportunities for us to improve are and how we're doing in general. So any final discussion regarding the health plan task force scorecard? Great. Thank you very much, Denise.
Thank you.
Tab 3 in our workbooks, Human Resource Labor Relations Committee FY22 work plan. And I'll hand that again back to Vice Chancellor Thielen for an update.
Sure. Thanks, Chair Bartholomew. I won't be reading through the document. You have it at tab 3.1 in your materials. Those who are trustees, of course, participating with committees know that each committee has a set of standing items that they expect to take up at certain times during the year, other items on an ad hoc basis, reports such as what we just heard from Denise, the IFTIF scorecard, which is an ad hoc but occurs on a regular basis, having said that, each September. I'll call your attention to what we've added. Of course, we've updated our year designations for fiscal year 22, looking ahead at collective bargaining goals for fiscal 23 as an ad hoc item. We, in our staff discussions with Chair Bartholomew, decided that we would consider adding a series of reports. So there are some new information reports in this version of the work plan that I'd call your attention to. Diversity, equity, and inclusion updates, given the attention and emphasis that we're putting on DEI efforts at the system level now, with the board charging the chancellor to reinstitute the DEI steering committee at a system level. And then, of course, retiree healthcare updates as we give renewed emphasis to that benefit that we provide. And then on a positive side, employee recognition and service awards. We know that that happens at the campus level, but we've not done, historically, not done as much at the system level with any reporting there. So we'll be looking over the next year at what we can do to bring information to this committee in those areas which are new for the work plan. That's what I wanted to call your attention to. And then otherwise just be available to answer questions about the proposed work plan.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. Thank you, Jim. And the final topic then we'll move to on our agenda is tab 4 in your workbooks, and it's the University of Maine Augusta President Search Preview. And again, back to Vice Chancellor Thielen.
And once again, thanks, Chair Bartholomew. This is just a short verbal update to let you know that we'll be bringing more formal requests for action and a charge to launch a search committee for the UMA president search. All of you know, of course, that the former UMA president, Rebecca Weick, moved on to another position to lead the state retirement system. And we now have in place an interim president at UMA, interim president Joe Zakis, who's also serving as provost, keeping his provost role over the next year that he serves as interim president. We do have a fairly routine process that we follow. We have a protocol for how we constitute a search committee. It tips very heavily in favor of representatives from the campus, representing the campus's faculty, hourly staff, salaried staff, academic administration, student body, board of visitors, alumni and community representatives, and then has, of course, 3 trustee representatives, one of whom serves as a chair of the committee, and a chancellor representative. I can tell you we are working on identifying the representatives across all of those stakeholder groups who I just mentioned or alluded to. We also have a request for proposal from search consultants who have already been pre-approved by the system. We put out a request to 4 different firms, and we expect to have proposals back by the beginning of next week. I expect that we'll have representatives identified for the 14-member search committee as early as the beginning of next week as well. So when we come forward to the full board meeting on September 27th, we should be ready to launch the search and go forward with the charge. Don't really have any other information, but wanted this committee to have that update.
Thank you for the update. Any questions, concerns, or final discussion?
Chair,
Trustee Gardner.
just to add on to the report just given, we'll have three trustees also ready to be named at the September board meeting for this committee.
Great, thank you.
And Trustee
Any further?
Bartholomew, I don't have any other work for the committee.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to our end of our agenda and 10 minutes ahead of schedule, I may say. So I appreciate everyone's effort today. And no motion is needed, so thank you all.